Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. Well, welcome in. This is the Know Your Ship podcast. We're speaking with Matthew Cole. Do you want me to call you Matt or Matthew?
Call me
what
Matt.
do you like?
Matt.
Who calls you Matthew?
My mom.
Just sure. Well, I'm a Francis. And my mom doesn't even call me Francis. You know who calls me Francis? It's like I have a sister-in-law who calls me Francis, and maybe one other like close friend that I've known for a long time calls me Francis. But I like having the name Francis. It feels like
more official or something.
Yeah, kind of like royalty. I don't know. Matthew Cole, Matt Cole. Matt runs a company and started a company called Beacon Data. But you have a really interesting and diverse background. We'll talk about all of that. And of course, Matt is married to a former guest on the Know Your Ship podcast. That's Ashley Cole, Cecilia, New York. She was fantastic, by the way. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to her podcast yet, but it's really good. She's super insightful. And I guess my question is, as we're getting started here, how do you keep up with her?
No, it's a good question, and I haven't finished the whole thing, and what I listened to was intimidating, right? Because she's like Superwoman. I always joke with her that I feel like she has more time in her day than she has 30 hours. We have 24, she just, and I think we all have our strengths and weaknesses, but she's on point 99% of the time, and so it's hard to keep up with, but I think I have some strengths she might not have, like when it comes to like relationship building and doing certain things like from a sales standpoint. And so, but I would say if we were to list our strengths and she had 19 out of the 20, I might have one that she doesn't.
You have the one.
Yeah. But anyways, so yeah, it's hard to keep up.
That one piece is important.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, relationship building is not an easy thing. Like that's a challenging thing for a lot of people. And in your role, I know, and it seems like in your background, that's probably been really meaningful, and to be able to cultivate that skill set. Yeah,
and I would also say like we're both cut out of the same cloth in a lot of areas. Like we're problem solvers, we're entrepreneurs. We when someone tells us it can't be done, that's like throwing the gauntlet down. Like we know that we're onto something, because if someone doesn't believe it can be done, then we know there's a way, and it's just trying to be creative and figuring out how to marshal your resources to get it done. And so, we're cut out of the same cloth in a lot of ways. And I think, she comes from a very entrepreneurial family. I come from more of like a working class family, middle class family. And so like, it wasn't I think it's in my DNA to run a business and to be an entrepreneur. Ever since I was young, like I've always worked really hard, and I've enjoyed having my own things. I had a paper out from 5th grade to 11th grade. And, and that in some ways is very similar to being an entrepreneur. And, I used to get some really nice tips around Christmas because I knew my customers, I treated them well, and they took care of me. And anyway, so I guess my point is that she kind of grew up with it. Like Sunday dinners, her dad would talk the ins and outs of business and problems they're dealing with, and to learn at his feet
how about to be
awesome.
a fly on the wall for those conversations?
Yeah. So it was kind of interesting culture coming into the family, because it was just a different mindset like than what I grew up with. And it wasn't a bad thing. Like I have a great family, but just different.
But a different background.
Yeah.
So we were talking about just prior the difficulties of being an entrepreneur and starting a business and running a business and all of the challenges. And so you just mentioned your childhood. I know that you have a background in athletics, and for me that's meaningful. I can lean on all of those experiences. Is that something that entrepreneurial spirit, the work ethic, the focus, the determination, is that something you saw in your family growing up? Is that something that you just naturally developed?
Yeah, so my grandfather was like University of Utah football royalty. I don't know if you know this, but he's Joseph B. Wirthlin. He's also
That's your grandfather?
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
Yeah.
There's so many levels that we were just talking about a friend of ours who runs a company called Fish Skins.
Yeah.
And how you're related there. Like every time there's some other connection,
Yeah.
but if you're a University of Utah fan, and I am, of course, like Wirthlin is a name that's on top of the mountain.
Yeah, no, he was an entrepreneur. He had Wirthlin Meats, and they had the wholesale business of their butchery, and then he had his retail, and then they sold meat to all of like the fancy restaurants in Salt Lake, and so I think I have it in my blood as well. But I would say, what was the question again? I'm trying to remember.
Where did you develop that skill? I mean, you started a paper route when you were early, but being involved in athletics at the level you were involved, and doing the stuff that you did to get where you are today. I mean, it's a skill set. It's something that not everybody has. So I'm curious about how you developed that.
So when I was young, I was about 4 years old, and my dad actually left my family. And so I grew up without a father around, and I had a lot of great father figures growing up that really mentored me. And a lot of them were coaches. And I think it wasn't until like 8th grade where I realized I could kind of be the captain of my own ship and write my own story and really, decide where I took my life. And it was actually a coach. His name's Larry Gelwicks. So he
another legend. If you don't know Larry Gelwicks, I mean, you could Google Larry Gelwicks. There's a movie about him and about his Highland rugby teams.
Yeah.
Correct. And he's also what is his moniker?
I think it's Columbus Travel.
Yeah.
So anyways,
like the travel guru.
Yeah,
Larry Gelwicks.
my brother was on the movie. He was an extra. Actually, I was asked to be in it, but I think you had to put your life on pause for like 2 months, and I wasn't in a place where I could do that. But he taught me so many life lessons and drew the parallels to sports. And I think, one of his biggest mantra was everything in life comes with a price tag, and you have to be willing to figure out what that price tag is. And you have to be willing to pay the price. And so in sports, that comes with hard work and discipline and doing the little things. And so our practices were super grueling. They were, 2.5 hours, and it was like pedal to the metal. Like, I think one thing the movie didn't get right was, in the movie, I think he has like a lawn chair he pulls up, and he's super chill. He was chill when he was talking to you one-on-one, but he was also super intense. And his practices were very organized, very structured. And it was the only thing I've ever seen really like it was like in college football, where you had like I think each practice was like 32 periods that were 5 minutes each, or something like that. It was like 10 minutes each. And every single minute of practice was planned out. And that's how he was. He was very structured. And so you would start practice with a 1 mile run. We called it the Sizzler. And you ran to Sizzler and back.
Down the corner.
On Sugar House. Yeah. They just got rid of that. But then you probably would run, I don't know, 5 to 7 miles in each practice. It was just really physically tough. And then you were expected on your honor to do your own personal running, which was a 2 mile run, and then 10 100-yard sprints and 10 50-yard sprints.
Daily
this was daily except for Sundays and game day. And so you can imagine like what that would do for you to transform your body. And so I think it was 8th grade when I started doing that. And, I was always kind of like a husky kid. And so I lost weight, got into like really good shape. And then the next year for football, I just did really well and played really well. And it was when I realized, I could do whatever I put my mind to as long as I put the work in. And so that's something that Larry taught me and ingrained in me. I ended up being captain for the team for two years. and went to Africa with them, and we won 4 national championships while I was there. And so that was, I would say, a big turning point in my life. And then, early on in my career, realizing that I have ADHD. And so realizing that with kind of my mindset, it would be tough for me to work for someone and not be in control of like my daily schedule and everything. And so, and then just being around my wife's family, the Neelemans, they're all entrepreneurs. And so I learned a lot from that as well.
So, and that happened fairly early on in your life. Is that high school period when you started getting involved with the Neeleman family?
Yeah. So when I was 17, I was a junior in high school. I met Ashley, and
did you guys didn't go to the same school?
No, she went to Olympus High School. I went to Contwood.
Gotcha.
And so I ended up working at this place called The Store, and it's actually funny because it was like it's right down the street from where we live right now. And I worked with one of her best friends, and that's how we met. And so, and then started dating, and then she kind of waited for me while I was on my LDS mission, and we got married pretty shortly after I got home.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha. And so you started to develop, I guess I'm not going to say the entrepreneurial mindset, but you developed this idea that discipline and effort and focus could help you get to the goal, to what you wanted. And you just learned that because Coach Gelwick said, these are the things that you have to do. You were disciplined enough to do them, and then you noticed the result when you started playing rugby, football, and you were also a wrestler, as well. And so that's that's a valuable and a lesson during a time in your life when you're really trying to figure out who you are and what you want to do. And so how does that translate then to and then of course hanging out with the Neeleman family? How does that translate then into starting a business, running a business? Because I guess there's similarities in those things, but it's a little different than jogging 2 miles a day and showing up at the office and working really hard.
Yeah, and I think there's similarities, but like you said, there's differences. But it's all about like building healthy habits and and being disciplined and putting in the work. It's success is just not going to come. Like you're not going to have your phone ringing off the hook when you first start a business. Like you have to go out and you have to make the phone calls. You have to, and you have to understand all the ins and outs of your business and really build a better mousetrap. And so I think there's similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And I think it's funny. I was telling someone this earlier today. There's this great reel I watched recently, and it showed this like skier that was wearing like these really fancy clothes, and he was about to go down a run, and he starts going down, and it says like what people think entrepreneurship is like, and it shows him like carving it up and looking like super elegant, and then he jumps off this like cliff and tucks it up, and it's like, and then what entrepreneurship really is like, and he hits and he does like 10 flips and looks like he dies, right? And so I don't know, I think that's a pretty good example of what it's like. And so you have to be mentally tough and strong, and you can't like lose it, right, when something goes wrong, because things are going to go wrong, and you have to have like a creative mindset and figure things out as you go. And that's just how it is.
I think one of the most interesting things about your story is you're a co-founder of Cecilia, New York. And people will hear that you're part of the Neeleman family and probably assume that you had some leg up because of all of the success and the airlines and everything else. But I think it's worth mentioning that both you and Ashley have built these things on your own. Like you had great examples, of course, around you, and maybe you even had great advice as you were along the way, but there's those things you built on your own without outside help or influence.
Yeah, and I think the thing about David, and he'll tell anyone this, so I'll say it on air, is, he's not leaving anything to his kids, and he'll help them. And, I've probably pitched 10 different business plans to him, and he's only really been excited about 2 of them. So he'll tell you what he really thinks. And actually with Beacon Data, he didn't invest in it. So I was kind of on my own, but he did help me kind of get my foot in the door in the airline space. So I think, he'll help open doors for you, but he's a lot harder on family than he is on, his everyday employees. Like you're going to have to put the work in and prove yourself. And so, cause he knows he did it the hard way.
That was his secret to success.
And he knows there's no like free lunch. You can't just give someone something and think they're gonna make something of it. It just doesn't work out. So yeah, you definitely have to, like for instance, like the contract that we ended up winning with Azul, I think we did a 6-month, it was a proof of concept, and we probably put in like 2,000 hours of free work to kind of prove it out. And then we were able to secure a contract, he didn't even sign it. It was like one of his executives, and they were the ones that made the decision. They wanted to hire us to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's interesting. We're starting to move over into the business side, but I wanted to ask you one more thing, and I don't know, maybe it'll lead to something else about your athletic career, because I think it's fascinating. You actually, so you played rugby, you wrestled, you actually started wrestling in college, but then the wrestling program went away. You ended up playing football in college, and you ended up at Fordham University. Now, if you're a football fan, you know that Fordham is significant in lots of ways because it was once upon a time a football powerhouse and very much associated with Vince Lombardi, who is the icon in football. So tell us about that experience going back to Fordham and playing football. Did you play there 2 years?
I played there 3 years, and so I went to University of Utah for 1 year and played there 1 year, and then transferred out and went out to Fordham for 3. So it was a great experience. I love football. I think it's the ultimate team sport. Like, if one person doesn't do their job, a play breaks down, right? And so something I think this parallels to business as well. Something I talk about in coaching is there's really only 3 things you should be thinking about on every single play. And this is like a mantra. Everyone I coach knows this. And it's assignment, alignment, assignment, technique. And then I always tell them the X factor is effort, because you can make up for a lot with effort, right? And so, alignment is where you're lining yourself up for success. And so if you're not positioned well, then you're not going to be successful. Assignment is doing your job, and then technique is how you're going to beat your opponent. Like, what technique are you going to use, right? And I think with football, that's what it's all about. And it's like figuring out exactly what your job is, doing it well, and doing it better than the person you're lined up against. And so, and I played defensive end. I actually was a fullback in high school as well, but I love playing defensive end. You have to have extreme discipline to like set the edge and contain. And it's probably one of the harder things when you think about it, like how much space you have to cover. And so, when I'm the D coordinator for a little league team, or I was the D coordinator for my son's 9th grade team, I always take my smartest and most athletic players, I don't care how big they are, and put them at the defensive end, because it's a tough spot.
Yeah.
Linebackers are too. But anyways, I'm kind of digressing and going into football a little bit.
No, this is perfect, because I use this analogy all the time. And I love what you said: assignment, alignment, technique, and then you throw in effort. And the reason I love that is because those are all the things that you can control.
Yeah.
Like the individual can control those things.
Yeah.
There are things that happen in a game or in life that you don't control, but if you do the things that you can control, then you increase your opportunity to succeed. And when I talk about teamwork, I say regularly, like the football analogy. If one of the 11 fails, then there's a good chance that the play is going to break down. So the key to success for a team is as many people as possible with the same goal, all heading in the same direction. Like if you have a couple of those people going in different directions, failure is right in front of you. And so I love that. I love that analogy. And I'm sure that's something that you've knowingly or unknowingly has helped you throughout your career.
Yeah, and I think in business, like alignment is really important. Like you said, like as a leader, you need to make sure that your direct reports are aligned with the vision, and you obviously you set the vision, you set the example, you're living the values that you preach. Those are all really important things, and if that breaks down, then you're going to have problems you're dealing with. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about that's a perfect segue, and I love that how you tie that experience into your business life and all of those things that you learned growing up. And by the way, I was the same way. I grew up in a great middle class family, lots of lessons from mom and dad. But I could also say that some of the most influential people in my life were the coaches that I dealt with. And it was both sides. I mean, I had really good coaches, and I had coaches that were really good because they were so terrible. And you never, you'd never want to do, like that was the lesson. I'm never going to act that way. So, and I'm sure you've had experiences like that as well. But let's talk about your business career. So you get out of Fordham, and I think you got involved in is that when you got involved with the sports training program? Yeah.
And so that was an interesting experience. It actually, when I started running that business, it turned into a franchise, but it was a license agreement at the time. It was called Blue Streak Sports Training. And we used this program, it was called the For Peer Acceleration Program, and they had high-speed treadmills and everything. And so now they changed their name to Athletic Republic. It's a franchise. But we trained athletes in small group settings. We also had like physical therapy, personal training, nutrition, and just adult classes and stuff like that. And so what's interesting, I take a lot of life lessons or a lot of business lessons from running that business. It was an extremely tough business. I wouldn't recommend to anyone to get into the fitness business because very low margin. It's just a tough business. But just really you're on the front lines. You're managing people. You're kind of doing everything. Like at least I was at the time, like wearing a lot of hats, like, managing the P&L, the marketing, even from a PR standpoint, trying to get articles in newspapers and different things like that. And so it really got my feet wet into wanting to like run and own my own business, and then realizing, I wanted to do something in my mind, something bigger, and that, not that I didn't enjoy being around sports, because as I explained, I have a sports background, but I realized, to provide the life that I wanted for my family, it probably wasn't going to be that business that provided it.
So was your experience, your last football game at Fordham, final gun goes off, was that devastating to think, or maybe you had a thought like, I'm going to go play on from this. The final instance of being on the field, was that devastating, or was it a relief, or how did you manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think very similar to you. I had some coaches, and I would say, and hopefully some of my coaches from Fordham aren't going to listen to this, but there was a couple that I just didn't really like, right? And just from the kind of people they were. And in fact, it turned me off so much towards coaching. I joked around with my wife and I was like, if I ever tell you I want to coach football, I want you to like punch me in the face, you know, like they were that bad. They were just like demotivating. And so I had a really good experience, you know, playing, but I think by the time I was done playing college football, I was ready to move on. And there was even, it was probably 4 years from when I finished playing college football that I didn't even watch football. Because I don't know if you had the same experience, but they definitely suck the fun out of it a little bit. It becomes a full-time job, and it's not the same as it is in high school and everything. So I did love it. I drew a lot of parallels of how I was going to be successful in life, but I think I was ready to move on. And I was 25, you know, I went on a mission.
Yeah.
And so, and by the way, that was kind of an interesting experience. Being at Fordham University, you know, I was married and older, and, you know, people thought that was strange because I was the only one on the team and stuff.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. It wasn't like Utah where like half the guys were married, you know.
Married,
I don't think that's the case
on
anymore,
the way.
but
yeah, not as much.
Yeah.
Not as much anymore for sure. Okay. So you go into the sports training, which is an interesting, we might have to have a chat about that later, because we take, you know, if you want to be a great wide receiver, then there's all of these things that you can do to train to be a wide receiver or whatever. And you guys were involved in all of those things, like nutrition, physical fitness, probably, you know, mindset, all of the stuff in training. And I don't know if we do that for people who are working in the business world all the time. And that's probably something that we should be doing, is training people how to optimize their talents in the office as well.
Yeah, one thing that I really took away from that business is we would sell packages of sessions and semi-private training, and we would always do a pre-test and a post-test. And we would always say, you know, this is kind of proof of what the program did for you, and it's giving, and we would create this certificate that would show like the before and after results. And I think that's really important in business, from knowing the value that you got from something. And, you know, we would always say that's what the parent's paying for. Obviously they want their kids to be in productive things, and they want, you know, them to have great experiences and be around good people that are going to help build character. But I also think they want to see that there was progress. And, you know, so we had all these averages that we would do. We would take 2 to 4 tenths of a second off your 40-yard dash, add 3 to 4 inches to your vertical leap, and all these different metrics. And I think in my data business, that's something that we kind of do when we first come in. We do like an assessment. This is where you're at, and, you know, we'll show you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then kind of give you like a future state of where we hope you can be, and then the roadmap of how to get there.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to talk about and focus on Beacon data and to get your thoughts on, was that passion about data developed when you were doing the sports training because you saw the benefit, or is that just how your mind kind of works, is that data is king and you needed all that data to keep improving yourself?
So and this is something I didn't really talk about, when I went and did my undergrad, it wasn't until my junior and senior year where I felt like I finally got in a rhythm and became pretty good at school, where I could get good grades and everything. School just was not something that, like, I'm ADHD, I'm more of a hands-on type of guy. And so I'm not the type where a teacher tells me to read certain books. I like that. Like, I like to read my own books. In fact, when I was in college, I read a ton of other books and probably didn't read all the books that the teacher
were assigned.
Yeah. And so when I graduated from college, I didn't really think that I was going to go on and get a master's degree. It was like, it just wasn't my thing. But when I was running Blue Streak, I had decided that I needed to go back and get an MBA. So I went back in 2012. I was about 31 when I went back, and I went to this school called Babson College, which it's like rated #1 for entrepreneurship by all these different magazines. And I think 100% of the professors are entrepreneurs. And it really opened my eyes to all the different types of businesses that are out there. It was actually founded, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I think it was Robert Babson, but it was founded to train kids of founders in the next generation to kind of take over the family business and then to take it to the next level, and to make it so that if a parent had started a really successful business and they handed it off to their kid, that they didn't just run it into the ground.
Yeah.
And so, but it's become this kind of like mecca for entrepreneurship. And so I went back and did that, and that opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And then I had a friend that was running this data consulting business, and he wanted me to come in and help him do some business development stuff. And so I started doing that. And one of the big contracts we won was actually with Azul, that we had worked really hard to win this. And I think it was like 6 months into the contract, our project manager ended up leaving for a big Google job, and he's getting paid a lot. So anyways, I was like the one that knew the most about it and everything. So I kind of stepped in as the project manager without having, a ton of experience, but I knew the ins and outs of what we were doing. And so it was like baptism by fire, and I just had to learn so much. And that's where I kind of fell in love with it, because you would sit in a boardroom with executives and you would talk about their biggest pain points of their companies, and realize that most of the answers were in their data. And it was like, we had this saying that we would say, and we still use this to this day, is that there's gold in your own hills. And because a lot of times executives will talk about, I want to enrich my data with outside data, and there's all these ways to do that. But we always talk about, let's extract the gold from your own hills first, and then we can think about enriching it. But the gold in your own hills is going to be way more valuable than any other outside data you can bring in, right? Yeah. Because it's going to tell you who your ideal customer is. How do you build like a lookalike model? How do you, there's so much you can learn from it. Yeah. So I think I became I became like infatuated with it at that point and passionate about it, because I realized how much difference you could make. And it's similar to sports. Like if you put the work in and you do like the little things, then you see results really quick. Yeah. And then we got into working with private equity companies. And something that I always like to tell people when they ask me what it's like to work with private equity is it's interesting. You can build $1 billion business off of almost any idea. It's all about execution. Like there's a company we're working with right now called Valet Living, and all they do, and they'll probably kill me for making it sound this simple, but all they do is they have contracts with apartment buildings where they'll take your garbage from the front door to the dumpster. And so when I first learned about their business model, I'm like, that sounds like a college frat kid started it. But literally, they're almost $1 billion business, and they figured out how to scale it, create contracts with all these different management companies, and basically the HOA fees cover the fees it's contracted. And then it's almost kind of like Uber. They have like these contractors that get paid based on the accounts they service. And so they do really well. And it's crazy to me that you could have an idea like that and it could turn into something so big, right? Yeah. And there's this other company we've worked with. This is another great example called Tosca. And all they do is they rent plastic containers to like Walmart and like big retailers to move around meat and fruit, and they own these containers, and then they they wash them and they take them back and they charge a fee. And this is like $1 billion business. I'm like, how in the world can you turn that into $1 billion business? You know, but that's what I've learned from private equity is there is like a secret, there's a formula. And it comes back to the same things. It's discipline, it's hard work, and it's just figuring out what your business model is and then just executing the crap out of it. You know?
Yeah, it's discipline and it's hard work and it's the other things you talked about, alignment and assignment. But this is where the data component is so critical. And what did you say, the gold in your own hills?
Yeah, the gold in your own hills. So understanding your customer and, you know, and extracting all the insights, I think is more valuable than you even realize. Like, because like when you have an executive that's like, I want to enrich the data so I can understand the demographic of my customer, and then I can do all this stuff and bring all this outside data in. It just, in some ways, it can muddy the waters. And so you really want to make sure you get all the value out of your own data first before you muddy the waters. And in some ways, you want to keep it separate if you're ever going to enrich it, right? Because it can tell the wrong story and lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to understand that.
No doubt. Have you ever had the experience, and I'm asking this for a specific reason, because it sounds simple, like, okay, yeah, we'll look through our data. Like, okay, we have it. It's all here somewhere, and we'll just look through it. Have you ever had the experience in a company where one department, they're looking at the same data, but one department is saying, no, the data says this, or is telling us this, and the other department is saying, nope, the data is saying and telling us this, and how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most challenging things that we do is like trying to get everyone on the same page. And they're called like a data dictionary, creating a data dictionary of defining what certain things mean and defining what a KPI is and getting alignment around those things. So it takes leadership both on our side and in the company side. And if you don't have someone that can really champion that effort, we have certain kind of principles that we follow to make sure that it's successful, and we call them like the 7 pitfalls. I won't go through them all because I can't remember them all, but
they're really good.
Yeah, they're really good. I should have brought them with me. But I think that's one of them, is having a champion on their side that can kind of own it and help them get alignment on their side. Because if you define a customer a different way, like if you're in marketing, you define a customer a different way than accounting does, then when you're looking at reports in a meeting, that can really kind of screw everything up. And, it's funny, you'll hear all the time, an executive will say this, that's from this system, and so we can't trust that. Or, and so we talk about this all the time. Like, one of the things we do is we help people build single sources of truth. They're called, data warehouses. And so essentially bringing all the data together and creating a 360 view of the customer where you have all the data kind of married together. And our data engineers will create a data model that ties and weaves all the data together. And it does it in an automated way, so that the data pipes will automatically bring the data in, bring it all together, and then you have like we call them customer master tables. Essentially, it's a SQL table that has all these different facets of that customer, and like what's their preferred method of communication, what's their favorite product, how many times they bought it, when they're buying it, So all these different things that can really help fuel your growth. And I think that's why we've had success with private equity, because one of the greatest plays in the playbook, I think, in business to really fuel your growth is your own data. And so so the way I explain how private equity works is, essentially it's similar to like the people out there that flip houses. They're buying companies and they're trying to flip them 3 to 5 years for 5 to 10 times more than they paid for them. And so they have a pretty strict kind of playbook that they use. And one of the ways is to make sure they're utilizing their data properly. So,
Yeah. Well, you make data sound really exciting. Like being able to dig, because that's where all the answers, I mean, the answers are kind of right underneath your feet, and
Yep.
and people don't always look in that area. As you look across your company, how long has Beacon been around?
so we've been around since 2018, early 2018, and a bunch of us work together. I mentioned a previous company beforehand, so some of us have been working together for almost 10 years.
Gotcha.
So we have a lot of continuity and everything. But yeah, what was your question on it?
Well, I wanted to know about Beacon specifically and some of the ups and downs of building that company. It sounds like, obviously the foundation is really strong. And when someone starts to utilize your services, there's going to be an obvious benefit and outcome. But what were the ups and downs that you've gone through during that time? What are some of the obstacles that you've had to overcome?
So I think one of the tough things is product market fit and understanding like what a customer wants that's going to be kind of scalable across multiple businesses, and it's not like this custom thing that you've built for one customer that no one else wants, right? And kind of templatizing. So we are a service company, and so we now have these templates that will get us like 70% there, and there's still custom elements to it. But I think that was a challenge. I also think finding and retaining good people has been a challenge. There's all sorts of different challenges. I think, early on we had the discussions, should we niche down on certain industries? Should we be like industry agnostic? Should we niche down on certain tools? And I still think there's some things we're kind of figuring out along the way. Like, it's tough in our business to niche down on certain tools because it's moving so fast. And I would say that companies' data it's almost like a unique fingerprint. It's all so different. Like, in our industry, we call them tech stacks. And so each company has their unique tech stack of their different types of, technical solutions they're using. And so you're not going to create, if you were to productize the business, you're going to leave someone out if you were to do that. And so the other thing we constantly have discussions about is, should we productize some of the things that we're doing and have like a product side of our business and then a service side of the business. And right now we're sticking just with the services, but we're creating like these kind of like micro internal products that we're using as templates to get to the solution quicker. So for instance, we have this tool called the AI assistant, and essentially what it is, it's a layer that sits on top of ChatGPT that you can query your own data in a private cloud where it doesn't expose all your data to ChatGPT, but you can use and harness the power of ChatGPT.
Gotcha.
And so that's like a tool we spent a lot of time working on. And so we've had some ups and downs for sure. I mean, I think the last couple of years have been more challenging than when we first started, because just the economy in general, and like, in the tech world, there's been a lot of layoffs and people are a little bit more hesitant to spend money on infrastructure projects and everything. So there's definitely been challenges.
Well, I'm glad you talked about that. I want to ask you next about maybe like a case study and a win in your business. But first, we have to go through my favorite part of the interview, which is called 3 Random Questions.
Okay.
I don't know how random they are really, because I've been thinking about it a lot, but one just came up that I think I'll ask you first. If you and Ashley were contestants on The Apprentice, I was going to say who would get fired, but that would be negative. Who would win, you or Ashley?
Well, I think, and I was this way in sports, I'm like a very gritty individual. Like I'm not, I was never super talented, but I will do whatever it takes. I would say Ashley has a little bit of that, but she has more talent than me, so I think she'd probably win. To be honest with you, but I wouldn't go out without a fight. So it would be
an epic battle.
It would be a battle.
Like we would need to put that in the Coliseum, gladiator style, and see who came out on top. By the way, have you seen Gladiator?
Oh yeah, that was one of my favorite.
The first one and the second one?
Yeah, I've seen both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not part of the 3 random questions. It just came up. Which is better, 1 or 2?
Oh, 1 for sure.
1 for sure. Okay, I agree. But how do you feel about 2?
I like 2. I feel like the plot line was, it was really good how they tried to weave the stories together. But there just felt like there's something missing where it was almost like too convenient, right? Like
Very.
You know what I mean? And
yes.
A little bit predictable and all that. And so I think 1 just brought this emotion out, right? Like, and I think a lot of people feel that way about, like, Braveheart was my favorite show growing up, and Gladiator the same. In fact, it's funny you bring up Gladiator, because in football I have this Beast of the Week award that we always do, and we have this Gladiator replica mask. And we take pictures with the kid, whoever wins it. And so
gotcha, love it.
It's Gladiator's a big part of my life.
Well,
bring that up.
Gladiator 1, you can't compete with it. Like trying to do a sequel to Gladiator, it's like a no-win situation. And even though there were some, like, is his name Pedro Pascal? Is that the guy who was, Jared, do you know who the guy was the star of the second Gladiator? Was that his name? Something like that? Well, like I thought his performance was fantastic, but I thought the storyline was a little, like it suffered a little bit. You just couldn't compete with number 1.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being like the head general and then being betrayed at the, you know, they really kind of connected you to that character, and then like him losing everything. And I think the second one, they tried to like basically take the same story and like regurgitate it another way. Yeah. And so that's where it fell short for me.
I think it was kind of interesting, but not nearly as good. Okay, so are you saying that Ashley would win because you're just a good spouse? I have to let you know, in all full transparency, just like I did when Ashley was on the podcast, I reached out to her and I said, tell me something about Matt that I should know. And my gosh, if I should just read it. It's like this, it's like a Hallmark card, like a sincere Hallmark card about all of the great things about you. And so I wrote back to her and I said, you guys are like the Avengers of spouses. Maybe that's my second random question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is that relationship to you in your life?
That's like a 10, honestly, because something that I talked about early on is like it's lonely on top. And so Ashley understands the ups and downs in running a business more than anyone. And there's things that I'll share with her. I think and she's the same way. And like we'll use each other as sounding boards and everything. And sometimes I think as a man, like we have the tendency when our wife or, you know, a girl tells us their problems, we automatically go into problem solving mode and we give them suggestions, and they're just like looking to, you know, they're just looking to vent. Right. And so I've had to learn along the way that she's not all the time looking for someone to like solve the problem, but it's more like giving them support and letting them know they have what it takes to figure it out. And if they do want help, jumping in and helping. And
I'm the worst at that. Like, I can't figure that piece out. I might need some coaching on that, because it's such a natural thing. It's like you just want to help solve a problem.
Yeah.
And I always jump into that mode. But I cut you off. What else were you going to say?
No, and I just think that, knowing that she understands, kind of the peaks and valleys of like running a business, and giving me the pep talk when I need it, or just reminding me of things that I've already been through, that I've already overcome, that are very similar.
Yeah,
those are amazing things, and I think it can be wearing, on, like, there's, like, for instance, like when we go on vacation, like there's like I'm doing interviews sometimes on Zoom, or I'm, like, work does not stop. And so I'm a firm believer in, I don't think you're ever going to have, in my opinion, it's impossible to have like a perfectly balanced life where you hear the term work-life balance. And I don't think, for me anyways, that's impossible. I like having a blended life, meaning I can do things with my kids and still run my business. And I think it's good to show your kids and talk to your kids about your business. And that's what was done in Ashley's family, and I still see it done today. And I think that's how you raise like kids that want to be entrepreneurs.
Productive and thoughtful. And
Yeah, and I think, treating kids in a way where, that they're really smart, and they, like, sometimes my oldest will have ideas that when I'm telling him about like a business problem I'm having, he's like, well, why don't you just do this? And it's like so simple, but yet like so smart, right? And then they have like a different kind of viewpoint of the world. It's all in these like short reels that they have, and he'll constantly send me these, oh, did you watch those? Oh, you sent me 10. How am I going to watch them all? Right? But they have, like, it's funny because they have all these like life lessons and different things. And so I think there is a lot of value in that next generation and like what they bring to the world. But so I think I'm going off course from your original question, which was how important is that relationship? It's an absolute 10 out of 10. So.
Yeah. Okay, this is a two-part question. Part one, how close are you today to your collegiate playing weight?
That's actually a really good question. So when I was at Fordham, I put on a little bit of weight, and so I got up to like 255. I'm like 235 right now.
You carried 255 pounds. How tall are you? 6 feet? 6'1"?
I say I'm 6'1", but I'm probably just a tad short of it.
Round up.
Yeah,
round up.
My
the data
son
says
is,
round up.
Yeah, my son is like almost 6'2", and he constantly reminds me, "You're not 6'1", Dad." So you're
under your playing weight.
I'm under, and so I had this like wake up call, and I think I was talking to one of your colleagues about this when we were getting a tour of your office. But I was coaching wrestling, and I was doing the drills with some of the kids. And
this was my follow-up question.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Go ahead and tell the story.
Anyways, and so I literally was in this drill, and I was like dry heaving. And like, I will tell you, I never once lost as a coach. And so I felt like I still had it, right, when it came to like the moves. But there, like, when this happened, and I started dry heaving, I was like so tired. I was like on the verge of losing to a kid that wasn't that great, right? And so I was like, I'm gonna die if I don't make changes. And so I ended up just realizing I needed to make some lifestyle changes and start like practicing what I preached. And so I started getting back on the wagon with working out. And so I do like 10 to 15 miles on my NordTrack bike every morning. And then I do like weight training 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And so I've lost quite a bit of weight. And so, yeah, it's, and then just like eating better.
Yeah.
So
we're starting to get into more random questions, but these are interesting. So Ashley does this thing with like celery water, right?
Celery juice.
Celery juice? Yeah, celery juice.
Yeah.
Are you on the celery juice thing? She almost had me convinced, except that it feels like it takes so much work to make celery juice. And she was talking about taking her juicer on trips and things.
Oh yeah. Well, so I don't know if I can say this on air, but I think
We can edit everything.
Okay.
So
But it does not taste good. It's like super salty and like just weird. And so it doesn't, like, think about like what like a fresh apple juice tastes like and how like sweet and amazing that is.
delicious.
And celery juice is the opposite, right? Like, I don't think anyone in real life enjoys eating celery unless you like,
does.
unless you put like peanut butter on
Oh
it.
wait,
And,
you don't like celery?
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't really love it. It's not my first thing.
I like celery.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay, you might like it then.
I might.
So you should try it. I think the physical effects from it are real. And so I've seen it, like it can transform like how you feel, and it kind of flushes your body out. And I won't go into specifics, but yeah, I think
we get it.
there's a lot of research tied to it and everything. And so Ashley is very similar to me, where, you know, she has an addictive personality, and so it's about building like good habits and becoming addicted to those things. And so I think for me, I've had to learn what works for me. And for me, like working out, it changes my day.
Absolutely.
And so
couldn't agree more.
And so I've become like addicted to that. And if I miss my workout, like I'm just not the same person. I'm like grumpy. It's like someone that has to have their coffee when they first wake up. Like I'm that way with working out. Like if I don't get the workout in, I'm just like a different person.
Okay, so but if you don't get your workout in the morning, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, definitely happens.
But can you get it done later in the day? Like I give myself a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
As long as I figure out how to do it during the day. Now, if it goes through a day where I miss and I shouldn't have, then it's like, oh,
yeah,
that was a real failure.
I definitely, and that's a good part about being an entrepreneur, is sometimes you do have to fit it in at a later time, and you can do that. And like I work from home mostly, and so I'm able to do that. And so it's not always like right when I wake up. It might be like at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Or,
but you get it in.
Yeah, I have to get it in before the kids get home from school.
For
else
sure.
It probably won't happen.
Or you're done.
Yeah.
Or you're done.
And then I'm the type of person where it kind of pumps me up. And so if I were to do it like 10 o'clock at night, I'm not going to
You're
go to
not
bed.
going to bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're watching Gladiator over and over again.
Exactly.
All right. Has there ever been a time in your business life, especially with Beacon, where you have felt like you were dry heaving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's like, I think, especially on a business where you haven't raised a ton of money. And I think like capital can be a double-edged sword, right? Like if you're a well-funded business, I've seen this. I've seen businesses we've worked with where they're just not smart with their cash, and they don't figure out early on that in order to have, you know, a successful business model, you have to figure out how to create cash flow from your business to kind of fuel your growth. And it becomes this like false, you know, reality of what the real world is. And so for us, we really virtually didn't raise any cash. We had this contract early on that was like $1 million plus, and that was kind of like how we built the business, and then we kind of like built it off of that. And so there's been times where I've had to thread the needle cash-wise where I was dry heaving. It's like, it's scary, right? And you have like a lot of people's lives, like you think of your employees, they depend upon you. You have contractors, and you know, it doesn't come for the faint in heart. It's a lot of stress. And I think anyone that hasn't managed trying to make payroll doesn't really know what running a business is all about.
Is this one of those things we were talking about earlier about, you said you wanted to talk about the difficulties of being an entrepreneur. Like people probably don't think about that.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have you may have a moment where cash is tight.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out there's a lot of people depending on you. You have to figure out how to make payroll, or you have to get that vendor paid, or you have to do something, and that's on your shoulders.
Yeah, and I think you have to be really creative and not be worried about having like a difficult conversation. So like it might be you might have payment terms with a customer that, they still have 10 days to pay you. But you have a good relationship with them. So you can make a phone call with their AP guy and try to push that invoice through. Or, and there's things like that you just kind of have to learn. And with my wife's business. So the difference between my wife's business and my business is her biggest expense is her product and like everything tied to that. My biggest expense is my people, because that is my product. It's a service, right? And so she has different problems, but it's the same thing. It's managing cash flow. It's for her, she has to lay out a lot of cash up front, pay the factory, and so she's had to. And I've helped her with this, like work out payment terms with the factory and take advantage of those long-lasting relationships that it's really based on trust and you want to treat your vendors like you're treating your employees, and so you have that line of trust when you have this like oh crap moment, you can like reach out and they can help you out.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a lot of that, and I think a lot of times it's just pushing through, and you'll have like little miracles along the way that get you through.
Yeah.
And so that's the only way I can explain it. And I think every entrepreneur has experienced that hasn't raised a ton of money. I think even raising a lot of money, you're going to come to a point where you have to figure out, like your investors are going to say to you, like, if you can't figure out how to be cash flow positive and like make a run at this, then we're going to fire you. It's like you hear about all the time.
Well,
right?
that is another thing. If you're going to raise a lot of money, you better be certain that the people you're aligning with are aligned with you. That could also cause a lot of problems and a lot of issues that you don't necessarily want to deal with. By the way, how much input do you have on any of the design of the shoes?
I have no influence.
You don't
whatsoever.
get any?
Well,
there's nothing like that little bow that I saw. That wasn't you?
No, that wasn't
the
me.
mat?
So
has this shoe been named after you yet?
I think she has like a Maddie, but I don't necessarily think it was named after me. I would say, so I don't know if she talked about this. I haven't listened to the full podcast in full disclosure, but she originally had this concept where she wanted to have interchangeable heels.
Yeah, she did talk about that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So that was this idea that she had, and I think I was pretty involved in the early days, and we learned a ton. And she knows, like, she's like an expert at all this, and there's just so many components that go into building a shoe. And so I have kind of joked with her and pushed her to do like a men's shoe line, because I think I listened to the early part of the podcast, and you're a shoe guy. You like
I told her
Allen
that I wanted.
Edmonds
That's what I'm wearing today, and Jordans,
right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and so I like a good dress shoe as well. I'm a shoe guy as well, and I would say I'm a sneakerhead. I have a lot of shoes. I love shoes. It's kind of my guilty pleasure a little bit, and I like watches too.
Oh, I was noticing your tag. That's nice.
It's all right.
I like it.
When my ship comes in, I'll buy better watches, but but I think so. Anyways, there's just so many technical details into developing a shoe, and I think when it comes, like, she's going into like bringing in some apparel pieces, and I think that's the natural next step. And so I think men's could come along eventually, but it's probably down the road.
Yeah,
So,
I told her when she needed some test subjects, I'd be happy to
and
throw my 2 cents in.
I don't know if you've ever bought some Taft shoes. I like some of the design they have. But for me, and I've only learned about this because my wife owns a shoe business, but it's too narrow. So I have a
That's
wider
my
foot.
problem. I do too. That's why Jordans work so well.
Yeah.
So they have a wider foot.
Yeah, I like Air Force Ones as well. Gives you a little bit of lift, and they're pretty wide.
Yeah.
But even like Dunks aren't that super wide. They're kind of narrow in the toe, right?
That's right. So I also have tried the Air Force Ones, but it's on a different last.
It is.
And the footbed is not wide enough. So I have to stick with Jordans.
Cool.
Yeah. And that's why I love Allen Edmonds. Allen Edmonds, you can pick your width.
Yeah.
And I've nailed it. I've dialed it in. I always tell people it's the most comfortable shoe I wear. Everybody laughs at me, but it's true. Allen Edmonds, Jordans, and cowboy boots. Who knows? Those are my things. I want to get more. I've already kept you here over an hour. You probably realize you're like looking at the like, I got to get out of here.
It's good.
But I want to move as we kind of wrap this up more into a kind of the philosophical side of this discussion. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about your experience and the wisdom you've gained over your time as an athlete and an entrepreneur and running a business. If I were to say to you, which is more important, culture or strategy, how would you answer that?
I would say culture every day of the week. And, I think you've probably read the book Good to Great, but I think Jim Collins has a quote that says it's 1% strategy, 99% execution. And I think that's so true because you can create like the best strategy in the whole world. And if you don't execute on that, then it doesn't mean anything. It's not going to do anything. And so I think a culture is so much more important because you could have the most, and I think the other thing I've learned about working with private equity is you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't execute that, then it's near impossible and build like a process and a system around it. It's near impossible to scale that business. Yeah. So I always laugh when you meet with a new entrepreneur and they have this amazing idea and they want you to sign this long NDA and you're just thinking, dude, I'm not going to steal your idea because I know how hard it is. I've lived this life. And in fact, like I hear it all the time. You'll get certain business people that want you to sign that NDA. And so most of the time I will just skim it and just sign it because I just know how hard it is to run a business. It's not easy. And so a good idea is not going to get you there. It's everything behind that good idea that's going to get you there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's the culture and processes you build.
Yeah, I agree. What is something that you or your company does really well, and how do you do that over and over and over again?
So something and you had asked a question similar to this before, something that we've learned the hard way. We have a principle called the last mile. And so in the early days, we were building solutions where we weren't kind of starting with the end in mind and we weren't talking with the frontline people that were going to implement the solution. And so what would happen is you would build this like really cool, like fancy solution that would end up not being used. And then nothing's worse than that when you're a service business and you build something that's not being used because you're not going to get repeat business if they're not using what they paid for, right? And so we started as part of the process interviewing the frontline stakeholders, understanding how that solution that we built was going to fit into the front end and how they were going to use it. So understanding the process, and it's kind of like what I talked about with my business at Blue Streak, the pre-test and the post-test, right? In order to get the results on the back end, you have to understand where you're starting from. And so that last mile is so important where you understand where they're starting from, build the solution, and then kind of hand hold them. And we call it the last mile because it's like, taking them to that last step to making sure that it's implemented, the employees are trained on how to use it, and then kind of helping them build out a process to use it and to build, those processes around that solution.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important, we learned that lesson the hard way, and we lost some customers in the early days because we didn't do a good job of that.
I was going to just ask you, have you ever been fired? And how did you not you individually, unless you want to talk about that, but have you ever been fired as a company? And how did you overcome that or take that experience and turn it into a positive?
Yeah, and we've definitely, so on average, I think our statistic is on average when we are hired by a company, they end up hiring us for, I think it's like 5.7 contracts. And so it's a pretty good statistic. I think it shows that people are overall happy with the results that they get. But we've lost, we've lost some big accounts that we were not happy about losing. And it's from a cash flow perspective, that can always be tough. But, and this is the way I look at turnover with employees too. Usually it's for a good reason. So for instance, I look at turnover with employees. There's good turnover and there's bad turnover. Mm-hmm. If you have an employee that, let's say they leave the company and they take a job that's a lot bigger than what they were doing for you, and they're making a lot more money, and it kind of it's like a bat signal. It sends out to the other employees like, hey, my experience matters here. What I'm doing can lead to these other things. Then I think that could be good turnover, right? And so I think with companies and contracts, it can be the same way. Like, so for instance, like we worked with a company called Olaplex, and it was, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they have over 100 different patents in hair products for women, and there's a lot of women that are really obsessed with it. And anyways, at one time their market cap was like $15 billion. And so we started working with them when they were bought by a company, by a private equity company called Abbott International. And the guy that started it, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but he was a patent attorney. And he wrote all the patents, and he owned 100% of the business. He sold it to Abbott, I think I don't know if it's public, but I think it was like $1 billion. Anyways, so, but we ended up losing them as a customer, and it was really hard because they paid us a lot of money. But it was good turnover in the sense that we helped them build their internal data team and build these processes around the solutions that we had built for them. And so I looked at it, I tried to use, a lot of my sports lessons that it was a positive thing, and, they're still using our solutions, but they had matured to the point where they were ready to kind of take it to the next step.
Yeah.
And so, but we've had bad turnover too, where you lose something because, of not such a good reason,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
Is that a learning experience?
Yeah, and I think you have, in business and in life, you have to treat it that way. Like I forget the term they use in the Army, but after a battle, they'll sit down and they'll break down like what went wrong. What is it called?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can't. Jared, do you know what that's called? Debrief. The debrief? It's something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But we'll have that. I think we call it postmortem, and
Yeah.
we'll talk. We'll talk about like what are the lessons that we can learn, like what went right, what went wrong, what can we fix going forward, how can we put that into our processes going forward so we don't repeat the same mistakes. Because like Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Right. And life is funny that way. If you don't learn that lesson from that experience you had, it seems like it just keeps happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
no
so
question.
definitely have had that happen where multiple times you have to learn the lesson. So try not to fall into that trap, but it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What is the best advice you've ever received or given?
That's a good question. I love the poem Invictus. I think the last two lines is, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Am I getting it right?
Yeah.
So, and I talked about this before when I was in 8th grade and Coach Gilwick's unlocked that in me. I think that is something that it's so true. Like, and also something that I read from Stephen Covey. He talks about the space between stimulus and response. And what it is, it's free will. You have something happen in your life right? That he calls stimulus. And then you have, how do you respond to that? And there's that space between it. And the truth is, everything in your life, you can look at it and you can say, you know, this really bad, crappy thing happened, and you can blame it and you can play the blame game. But the truth is, you had that space. And sometimes the space can be bigger than you know, you have a longer time to kind of figure it out. But you can, and I think that I learned this in wrestling, is you are completely responsible for the outcome. And it's like you said, control the controllables. And so I'm throwing a lot at the wall, and not giving you one specific thing, but I think those are like life lessons I've learned along the way. One thing I didn't talk about that is important, that was like foundational to my success in my life, is wrestling. I'll just, can I tell one more story about wrestling?
Absolutely, as long as you want.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, back in the day, I went to Collinwood High School. It was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, so they didn't have freshmen. So I didn't start wrestling until I was a 10th grader. And we had the wrestling coach come into our football team. Football season was kind of wrapping up, and he kind of made the pitch of why we should wrestle. And I was, you know, I was a basketball player. I played AAU through 9th grade, but a 6-foot center just doesn't work, right? And I think the high school coach had told me, yeah, you'll probably make the team, but I'm going to use you as like their enforcer to get the hard fouls at the end of the game. Yeah. And so the wrestling coach, his name is Coach Ohai. And what's interesting about him is he has 2 daughters that were both collegiate soccer players. One's married to J.J. Watt, and one's married to Brian Cushing.
That was your high school coach?
Yeah. Ben Ohai.
Oh my gosh.
So,
remember when I was talking about all of these layers that you have?
Yeah.
Here we go again. That's amazing.
Yeah. So Ben Ohai, he was he was an All-American wrestler at BYU, and he was an Olympic alternate. And so his pitch, he's like, how would you like to walk into a room and know that you could take any man in that room? And I think about that all the time, and it's so true. Like, I don't think I've ever walked into a room and not thought, oh, I could take that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that, like, for some reason, it like pushed that gladiator button in me where I was like, this is awesome. And so I remember the first match that I wrestled. I was wrestling this kind of pudgier kid, and I definitely felt like I was way more athletic than him, but he had more technique than me, and he had had a lot more matches and everything, more experience. And so I remember I flipped him over on his back, but I somehow got on my back first. And all of a sudden the ref slammed the mat, and I jumped up, started cheering. And turns out I pinned myself. And
which is
I was like, Coach Ohai was like shaking his head. He's like, I've never in all my 30 years coaching seen someone do that. You literally just pinned yourself. And it was almost hysterical, right? And I remember during that pitch that he originally pitched me in to wrestle, he had pulled me aside because he had seen me play football. And like I said, I played with a lot of attitude and grit. And he's like, I promise you, I will make you a state champion by your senior year. And I just remember after that first match, like, he didn't renege on the promise, but he was like second guessing himself, right? And he's like, well, I don't know, I might have written a check I can't cash, right? Yeah. And so anyways, I just used that as fuel. And what he told me was, you know, what I've learned about wrestling is you really only have to master 3 moves. If you can master 3 moves, you can win state. And so I ended up mastering a stand-up, a single leg takedown, and I had this like really, I call it like, it's a cradle, but it was really mean, and it was a really painful move. Like, I'd put my forehead in their temple and just squeeze. So anyways, it went from my first match pinning myself to my senior year being underrated and not ranked in the state, like preseason rankings, to then going on and winning state. And there were just so many life lessons in that, because something about a sport where it's all on you. And if you lose, you can't blame anyone but yourself. And it's like the man in the mirror kind of mentality.
Sure.
And so I think there's a lot to learn from that. So anyways, I guess I share that because there's a lot of life lessons I've taken from that. And then football, I think, is the ultimate team sport. So
Yeah, no question. Well, you reminded me, we were talking about Gladiator earlier, and if you've ever followed Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius, he talks about if you have self-doubt, you should look within. And I think that's kind of some of the things you're talking about, is that you have all of the talent and the ability within you. Sometimes we just don't trust ourselves to look within. And I feel like all of these experiences have taught you that lesson over and over again, especially when people talk about effort and grit and determination, because that's all you.
Yep.
It's nobody else.
Have you ever read the book by Ryan Holiday? The
Yeah.
Obstacle is the Way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm reminded of that lesson a lot, that sometimes we try to figure out a solution around the obstacle, and the obstacle is the way. Like, going through is the way. And so unfortunately, that is one lesson I feel like that hasn't stuck, and I have to learn it the hard way over and over again. But it's an important
There's
lesson.
probably a reason we have to do it over and over again. It's so valuable.
Yeah.
You have to learn it over and over again. This has been fantastic. So insightful. I loved all of your thoughts, especially about assignment, alignment, technique, or alignment, assignment, technique, throw in effort for good measure. Your thoughts on culture and strategy, fantastic. Your life experience. What did we leave out? What else did you want to, what other nugget of wisdom did you want to leave with our listeners?
I would just say this, like, a lot of the stuff I've talked about, like, I've taken from stuff that I've learned and read. And like, so I don't know, do you know who Riley Jensen is?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
So actually the whole alignment, assignment technique, that's his. The only part I bring in is the effort. And so I actually met with him with my son, because he was having a little bit of self-doubt on, Olympus is a tough place where he's at, and there's a lot of competition. And so I just want to, as a parent, you want to give your kid every chance to succeed. And so I went to a couple of these sessions with him, and he talked about that. And anyway, so I guess my point was that leaving out for listeners is to continue to learn and read and apply it. And I would take little credit for a lot of the stuff that I've shared, because it's other people's stuff that I've applied to my life.
Well, it's other people's stuff that you've taken the time to learn and to perfect in yourself. So don't leave yourself out of that. By the way, Riley Jensen, I've known Riley for a long time. I knew him before I call him a sports astrologist, just to mess with him a little bit. But I think it feels kind of accurate, too, to call him a sports astrologist. He's fantastic.
He is.
Should I ask him to be a podcast guest? I keep thinking about this, and I think all of his lessons are super valuable.
I think they're super valuable. I mean, his whole lesson around control the controllables, and like, there's so many life lessons. I kept on thinking when I was sitting in there in those sessions with my son, I'm like, man, I want to like hire you to like coach my business, because like there's so much that applies to the business world,
for sure,
of what he teaches. I think it would be super valuable.
Hey, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you? What's your website?
So my website's beacondata.com. So yeah, check us out. Love to service your business and help you with your data challenges. And
it's all about the data.
It's all about the data.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Been a pleasure. Appreciate it. Hopefully we can have you back again when your ship comes in. But it feels like your ship already came in. I don't know what we're going to talk about next.
Oh man.
Wait, you're the best.
Thanks. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.